I've traveled to all 47 prefectures on a series of road trips and adventures while I was living there, and ever since I've gone back just about yearly, if not more so. Japan is my second home. I love it. And one thing I recommend to my travelers every time they go to Japan is a traditional accommodation stay. So some trips will include minshuku, which are more in the 2-star range, mom and pop style with shared facilities. There are machiya, which are in some cities like Kanazawa and Kyoto. These are renovated townhouses that are for private use and typically don't include meals or have a designated staff. But today we're going to talk about the most commonly included traditional stay, the ryokan. So what exactly is a ryokan? Traditional Japanese inns are ryokans. So sometimes you'll hear it referred to as just an inn. They focus on amazing service, on maximum comfort. They have traditional architectural components like tatami, the woven mat flooring, shoji, which are the sliding doors, bamboo, stone, gardens, and onsen baths. So those are a lot of the different features that you'll see. In this picture alone, I mean, you can see the bath, you have the bamboo, some of the beautiful stone, and a garden, so you can kind of get a little bit of it all in here. They have 3, 4, and 5-star ryokan available. So a lot of people kind of get it in their minds that a ryokan is a basic stay and that they're going to be roughing it, but that is not the case. That's kind of more of what a minshuku that I mentioned previously is, where you would share facilities and things like that. At a ryokan, the majority of them do have a private toilet, and some of them will have private baths and whatnot, which we'll get into a little bit more later. So ryokan, there are 6 of them here that I'm showing you. These are the front of the ryokan, so you get a feel for what the style is like. And they have these traditional styles of architecture, a lot of wood, blending into their natural environments if and when possible. So these are just a few examples of some really lovely ryokan. The first one up here in the left-hand corner is the Aso Sozankyo Ryokan in Aso Kumamoto in Kyushu, the island of Kyushu. Then the next one we have here is the Suiran Ryokan in Kyoto, outside of Kyoto a little ways, not in the middle of the city. This one is the Mikawaya Ryokan in Hakone National Park, not too far outside of Tokyo. Then we have the Arumaya Ryokan in Yunamine, Tanabe, and Wakayama. So this one is one that you would visit if you were walking along the Kumano-Kodo pilgrimage, for example. Then we have the Nishimureya Honkan Ryokan in Kinosaki in Hyogo. That is in an onsen town, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then the last one over here is the Hoshinoya Ryokan, also in Kyoto, and again on the outskirts of Kyoto. So we talk about locations of ryokan. They are scattered throughout the entire country. So this map breaks Japan up into a variety of different regions. Typically, if you're talking to me or one of our other travel experts about Japan, we're going to talk about the main island of Honshu, which is from the tip here all the way up to the tip here. It does break down into regions within within Honshu, but it's unlikely we're really going to delve into those with you because it's overly complex. Hokkaido up here is the island to the north, which does have some ryokan. Honshu is going to have the majority of what we're dealing with. Shikoku will have some, and the island of Kyushu, which I mentioned before, does have some ryokan as well. So the one thing to remember with ryokan is they tend to focus in areas that are more rural. So you're not going to get a ryokan in the middle of Tokyo. So if you have a short trip and you really want to stay in a ryokan, you're likely going to have to spend a little bit of time in transit to access a beautiful location that will have ryokan available. So I mentioned Kinosaki previously. This is Kinosaki. It is an onsen town in Hyogo. So just as an example, Hyogo is right in here, and Kinosaki is, if you can see my little red dot, right here. So it has a lovely river going through the town. It has ryokan kind of up and down the sides of the road, and it is an onsen town, which means it specializes in hot springs. So it has a lot of geothermal activity, and because of that, a lot of ryokan popped up over the years in the area, and you can see people kind of walking along and enjoying themselves after they've had their evening meal, or perhaps walking down to another bath, that type of thing. So onsen hopping is quite a popular activity. So this one is in my old haunt. This is in Toyama Prefecture. This is the Unazuki Onsen area in Toyama. So if we pop back to the map, that's right about here, red on red, sorry about that. So this one is in a mountain location, the beautiful Northern Alps. You also have a river, so not only, we're doubling down here. We have a beautiful water feature as well as mountains in a nice rural area. So here you're gonna have the ryokan isn't going to be quite the same aesthetically as what you experienced in some of the other regions that are more forested or a little bit further away. This one is a little bit more, I would not quite industrial, but a little bit more built up because it's a bigger onsen town and it has more people. So they have something that's akin closer to a hotel resort than a smaller ryokan. So they do come in some various sizes. So here, the Kawaki and Tenyu is in Hakone in Kanagawa. So again, in the Hakone National Park area. This is their outdoor bath. One of their features is a lovely waterfall that you just can look out on and gaze at while you're bathing. And then here is the Lamp no Yara Ryokan in Noto in Ishikawa. So the Noto Peninsula is not a place that can really be accessed by train, which is how most of our travelers make their way around the country. So in order to get here, because it's more off the beaten path, a lot of people would have to use rental cars. So because of that, it is predominantly visited by Japanese as opposed to foreign tourists. So it has a really authentic feel when you go there, but if you're looking for a place that has all of the conveniences you would anticipate in English, like menus and things like that, that's not going to be the case. If you want to experience something truly Japanese and you love a coastal view, this could be the spot for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about clothing and shoes and etiquette when you are in the ryokan. I know this can be a little bit confusing for some folks. So there's no official dress code when staying at a ryokan. The type of clothing you'll see can depend on the luxury level of your stay. So if you're staying at a 5-star ryokan, you might want to dress a little bit more fancy. If you're staying at a 5-star ryokan, your dress is probably classier anyways, what you're bringing with you. You're not going to be walking around in scrubby clothing like me traveling around when I was a teacher. If you're staying at a 3-star ryokan, things are a little bit more relaxed. The staff will almost always be wearing traditional kimono or yukata, which are a cotton variation of the kimono. So you don't have to be the same level of fancy as the staff. Don't worry about that. And you're not required to change into a yukata for your stay, but it is fun. So this is a yukata. This is me in a yukata. So the yukata is super comfortable. I do recommend putting it on. You can wear it with underclothes underneath or not, depending on how you feel. They're usually thick enough that it's not risque by any means. The only important thing to remember is that when you are wrapping the side over one another, you want to have the left side over the right. So the way that you remember that is if you were going to get a knife out or a sword out from underneath your robe, you would pull it out with your right hand. Sorry, lefties out there. You pull it out with your right hand really easily underneath the flap of your robe. So the reason we don't do it the other way is that's reserved for funerals. So you'll see that coming up with chopstick etiquette as well. Japan is unique in that manner. So the genkan is the area where you're going to remove your shoes. I believe we have a photo of the genkan right here, which I'll talk about in a moment. The genkan is when you walk in, there's a raised area, which is kind of the nicer flooring in the ryokan. And the genkan is considered not necessarily part of your home. So let's say a salesman was coming to your door, they'd knock and walk straight on into the genkan and say like, hello, I'm here. Whereas if you're walking to the ryokan, you're greeted, you take your shoes off, and then you change into either slippers that are provided, or if you're leaving to go out and do a little walkabout, you would be provided with geta. So the geta are wooden sandals that you can wear outside. You could also change into your own shoes if you'd prefer. I know a lot of Westerners who have larger feet are more comfortable doing that because they don't always have geta that are the appropriate size for us. Smaller footed folks out there, no problems. Then you can use the provided slippers, or you are welcome to use your socks or bare feet when you're walking inside the ryokan, but you do not use your shoes. That is because a lot of the floors have tatami mat flooring, and they can be very easily damaged by any kind of bare feet or even the slippers. When you get to the tatami portions of the ryokan, especially in your room, you're going to remove your sandals before you walk on that as well. So it may feel like a lot of switching in and out of shoes, but it really does come a bit more naturally after you've done it for like even a few hours. The other thing that I did not mention on here is toilets tend to have their own slippers as well. So even in your own room, there may be a pair of plastic slippers in your toilet room that you would slip into when you use the toilet, because who doesn't need another pair of shoes to confuse you, right? So again, here's the genkan. You're going to see the folks that are working at the ryokan. They are going to greet you, and this is quite a formal greeting with a bow. They are wearing a traditional kimono and obi, and they are focused on service. So the moment you walk in, you're going to get a really big irashaimase, which is like a welcome, please come in, and they will check you in. They will check and see when you're going to have your meal, ask you if you need anything, and a lot of times show you the facilities and then take you to your room. So service is top notch at a ryokan, which is another reason why it's set apart from a typical hotel or other type of stay. So these ladies down here are showing the yukata that is provided at this specific ryokan, which I believe is the Mikawaya in Hakone as well. And this is wintertime. As you can see, there's some snow outside. They are wearing a little additional robe top that comes with the yukata in the winter. And it's just a little button in the front, so it's a little bit warmer. You can also see they're wearing their provided slippers. And she's walking into the room right here where you're going to get changed for your bath. So this woman is walking with her yukata. This is a summer kimono and her obi. She has her little matching purse and her geta. So she's walking outside. And this is another onsen town. You could tell with the geothermal, it's a geothermal area because of the steam coming out. So here are some examples of room types at the ryokan. I'm not going to break down all of these specific ryokan, but rather focus on some of the elements. So the shoji here are the sliding doors. In this case, these doors open so you can view the garden that is outside of your room. The low-lying furniture, where you have the seat backs and you sit on the floor, but on zabuton, on cushions. This is very common. For those of you that have knee problems or can't really sit on the low floor like that or have trouble getting up and down, we do have places where you can dine at raised tables or some that have a lowered floor. So your feet would kind of come to here and then there'd be a hole in the floor that you would essentially be sitting at a regular sized table in practice. This is a balcony that has a private onsen, which are possible at some ryokan. We'll talk about that in a little bit. This is another one that has a garden with a private onsen. And another example of tatami and the lowered table, some shoji sliding doors, a private garden, and a little pathway with some stone lanterns and whatnot. So this is a slightly more modern variation where you have somewhat of a thicker style of futon, not the thin futon that you might see at a more traditional place, but these are nice and fat, and these are resting on a wooden platform, so this is a little bit raised up. We do have other ryokan that have raised platform beds with a thick futon like this laid on top of them, and then we have the more traditional where you are having your futon laid out in the evening by the staff members on the tatami. Usually at any of these places that are 4 or 5 star and up, well, I guess there's no up from 5. If they're 4 or 5 star, they're going to have thick, comfortable futon anyways, but we have in some cases requested that a futon be doubled. When I was pregnant and traveling, I requested a doubled futon and they were more than happy to oblige. For couples, you can push your 2 futons together and you'll essentially have one big bed. And if you're traveling with little ones, I love staying at ryokan when I have my babies with me because they will just roll right over to the corner of the room on the tatami and I'll just put a little futon up there and they're fine. They don't typically have baby cots and that type of thing, but if you are traveling with family, feel free to ask and I can give you options. Okay, so here are some other examples of tatami. The room on the left is a Japanese style, where the room on the right is a Western Japanese kind of hybrid style, where you have the raised beds here and here, but this area is tatami. And if you had a family of 4 sharing this room, the parents might each have a bed, and then we'd have 2 futons laid out only in the evening for the kids to sleep on. And then in the daytime, they would be rolled up and put away in one of these paneled walls here. And again, you have the private onsen on the balcony. So this is what a typical bathroom is going to look like. You're going to have a sink or 2 in this case. This is me being spoiled. You have all of the things you would see at a typical hotel, usually on a higher level with amenities and soaps and conditioner and all that jazz. And then over here, just to the right of this photo, is a sliding glass door that leads you to what is kind of the rinse-off shower bath area. I don't really have a proper name for what this area is because it is specific to Japan, but you have a little seat here, a little wooden seat, and you sit down here and you can use the shower head to wet yourself, lather up, rinse off, shower, before you then use the sliding glass doors behind you to go to your private onsen that's on the balcony. So the toilet itself is located in a different section of this room. This was a room I stayed at a few years ago in the Hakone Ginyu in Hakone. And the toilet is just in its own little enclosed space on the opposite side of the room. So they are not always attached to the bathroom. So onsen. This is a beautiful public onsen that is at one of the ryokan. When I say public onsen, I mean it is open to anyone who is staying at that ryokan. So you're not going to have members of the general public popping in. They are gender segregated almost 95% of the time. You will be definitely told in advance by your agent or by your specialist that it is mixed gender if it ever is, but it's rare. So what you're going to see here is there'll be an access point where you will get in, get changed, have little cubbies to put your clothing and your slippers and whatnot into. Go into that area where you're going to rinse off, like this little area. They'll have a bunch of these little stools and shower heads. So you are not allowed to wear clothing when you go into these, when you go into the public baths. If you have a private onsen, that's fine, but I'll talk about that in just a second. But if you're going to a public one, they are gender segregated. So in the women's, you cannot wear a bathing suit. In the general women's one, you cannot wear a bathing suit. In the general men's one, you do have access to a modesty cloth, if you will, but really it's just a small little washcloth, so it's not going to have a lot of coverage. You could, if you chose to, wear your towel to and from the bath, but you cannot wear it in the bath. So these ladies here are setting a slightly bad example because they are models and they're just having a photo taken, so they are wearing towels. This is not the norm. So sorry to give you false hope. If you have the private onsen in your room, no one is going to know that you have clothing on. So let's say you have a family of 4 and you all want to have a bath together. That's fine. No one's going to know. You can use it however you like. But if you do go to the public onsen, remove your clothing, you must clean yourself before you soak in the bath. That is a massive faux pas. If you just like walk in and hop in the bath straight away, you will get all the bad looks. So clean off, even if you're not dirty. When you walk into the little area with the cubbies and the changing room, there will be a curtain. So these ladies up here, sorry to go back so far, are walking in through the door into the changing room. And this is the red curtain. And the red curtain is for women, and there'd be a blue one for men. So you're going to look for red and blue. That's the easiest way to do it. But this is ona. This is the kanji for woman. And this is otoko. This is the kanji for men. So if you're nervous, this information is usually in your info packs, but just in case. They'll always tell you at the ryokan if you have any questions as well. So no clothing allowed, we covered that. No tattoos in public onsen. So I am personally tattooed. I am frustrated by this component of Japanese culture. It's unfortunate, but it's still around. They're very black and white with their rules and regulations in Japan. So even if you have a tiny tattoo that's like a butterfly on your ankle the size of a nickel, you cannot go in the onsen if it says no tattoos. So it's just really frustrating, and I'm sorry for anybody tattooed out there, but we have workarounds. So a couple things you can do. First off, you could get a private onsen, like one of these lovely beauties here. The private onsen in your rooms, no one's going to know you have a tattoo, so no one's going to notice or care. The other option is called kashikiri. Kashikiri is a reserved onsen. So you could go in and make a reservation if the ryokan has kashikiri onsen available. So you could ask your travel agent in advance. The specialists are going to be able to look and see if they have a kashikiri option. And then sometimes you can reserve them for like an hour or 40 minutes in advance of your stay. And sometimes it's when you arrive. Sometimes it's free. Sometimes it costs just a little bit to reserve it. It really is dependent on the specific ryokan. So please ask. And you can reserve that for yourself. You can reserve it for you and a loved one, or you can reserve it for your family, depending on the size of it. So this is just an example of what some of the baths look like. They come in a lot of different varieties. This one has a gorgeous view of the mountains and the forest. This one of the garden forest again. This is Sakurajima down on the island of Kyushu, so a lovely volcano, more mountains. And this one is carved into a rock, which is just absolutely stunning, and I want to go there. So as you can see, the ryokan really love to be in areas where you have natural beauty. So be it coastline or mountains or forest or river, you have something to look at and relax as you are in the hot water soaking everything away. So let's see here. A couple of other quick rules for your bath etiquette. You're not going to want to splash or swim in the onsen. just because it's not how you do. You are going to want to enter the onsen slowly, and you're going to take your time. I would recommend, if you've never done it before, give yourself about 5 minutes a time. So you can soak for 5 minutes. This is my husband soaking at ours. That bathroom I showed you earlier is connected right here via a sliding door to give you an idea of how you can pop out right to the onsen. And then there were some chairs over on the right side where you could lounge, have a drink, and then get back in the water. So take breaks. No one really sits in the onsen for 20 minutes and then just says, okay, I'm finished. And it's not meant to be a quick in and out kind of thing. It's soak, rest up a little bit, soak again, do it however you like. Specialty baths are available at some ryokan. Sometimes they have electric pulses that go through the water, which is absolutely amazing. It sounds terrifying at first, like electrified water, but it's worth it. Sometimes they put in special oils or special fruit floating in the water. When I lived there, royal jelly was all the rage. So there are a lot of different varieties available based on the season. If your ryokan has them at the public baths, take advantage. I mean, it's really cool to just try the different varieties, and lovely. And then afterwards, after you're finished soaking, you're going to want to rinse off because there can be some minerals and things in the onsen. Sometimes if it's a therapeutic onsen, you might want to keep those minerals on your skin, and that's fine too. But most people like to rinse off because they've got a little bit of a sweat going from soaking in the water. Other folks like to have a glass of milk, which is a thing in Japan. Like, I can't imagine having a hot bath and then wanting a cold, refreshing glass of milk, but maybe that's just me. Um, my husband used to live in Wisconsin and he couldn't abide by that either, so I really don't know. I would go more for a beer, but you can have whatever you like. Having a refreshment afterwards is wonderful. Do not drink before you go in the onsen, please, because it is just like a sauna. You're going to be sweating and you don't want to get dehydrated. Bad for everybody. Seasonal enjoyments here. If you happen to go in the winter, or if you happen to go in an outdoor bath while it's raining or snowing, so nice, so peaceful. And if you get really lucky and there's snow next to the onsen, kind of in the area around it, you can get out of the onsen, get into the snow, and you can rub the snow on your skin, or you can kind of lay down in the snow and shock your system a little bit and then get back in the water. It's amazing. All right, now getting to meals. So this is probably the most important part outside of the onsen of staying in ryokan for a lot of people. I know there are a lot of foodies out there, and the meal is in the evening is traditional kaiseki ryori, which is just absolutely fantastic. So the meals are so elaborate and normally quite large, so we don't recommend staying more than 2 nights in a row at any specific ryokan during your trip. The reason for that is the meals become a little bit redundant after a while, and we don't want you to have the same meal if you're staying for 3 nights. The first night might be the same as the third night because it's so specialized. So, slipping down here. Check-in and check-out are when you're going to find out when your meals are going to be served. So they'll usually say upon check-in, what time would you like to eat your dinner, and they'll give you a range of times. You must be back to the ryokan in time for your meal. Japan is huge on punctuality, so being early is on time. That's kind of the rule of thumb. So make sure you're there in time for your meal. Your meals are likely going to be served in your room or in a dining area. It's going to be dependent on the ryokan. Again, if you want one of those specifically, tell your travel specialist and they'll be able to arrange the correct ryokan for you. And then checkout is going to be after breakfast, of course, but you don't want to say travel at 6 a.m. the morning after your ryokan stay, because your meal is not going to be ready until maybe 7 or 8, and you don't want to miss breakfast because it's also an integral part of your stay. So dietary restrictions can be accommodated at some ryokan. We must know in advance. So if you've ever traveled to Japan with me, you know I always ask this question, and some people wonder why. This is exactly why. There are limited numbers of ryokan kitchens that can accommodate certain restrictions. So if you're vegetarian, they're pretty good with that. If you're pescatarian, you pretty much have no problem. Kosher should be no problem at most places. But if you get into more strict, or things that are not as commonly seen in Japan, like if you have a gluten allergy or if you are vegan, those can become a little bit more complicated for the kitchens, so they tend to get nervous. And I can still arrange places that can do it, but they are in the upper level, so into the 5-star range, which, I mean, the benefit of that is you have a fantastic meal as well as a fantastic stay. It will cost a little bit more than, say, a 4-star ryokan, but they will accommodate your diet. So hashi, I mentioned this briefly earlier, chopsticks. The use of them, don't stress too much because if you're eating in your room, no one's going to know anyways. But two things to just avoid if you're using hashi: do not jab them into your food. So you don't want to ever have your hashi sticking straight out of your rice bowl, for instance, and you don't want to hand someone else food to their hashi via your hashi. So as long as you're not doing those two things, you're probably fine. But both of those things are parts of a funeral rite, along with that yukata thing I mentioned earlier. So you just want to avoid those because it could give you, someone might give you a little bit of a hairy eye if you do it. There is a ton of food, so much food, anywhere from 3 to 16 courses I've seen before. Sometimes they're served one at a time, sometimes they're served all at once. So do not feel like you need to eat everything. If you do, you will be just rewarded with all of the compliments, like, oh, you're a beautiful eater, you're so wonderful. But as a lot of foreigners do go to Ryokan nowadays, there's a lot of food that's kind of confusing. Like if you look down here, these little guys are edible, although they look like they're part of the decoration on the plate. So not everyone's going to know what is edible and what is not on some of the plates. A lot of Ryokan will have a list of what all the food is, which is amazing. We're trying to get more and more of them to do that, so you kind of have an idea what you're eating. But don't feel bad if you miss something, and feel free to ask your waiter or your waitress if you have any questions. Okay, so the kaiseki ryori is the dinner that I talked about. It's seasonally focused, so whatever the freshest ingredients are for the time that you are traveling in Japan, maybe even what's in the market that day or what's pulled out of the sea that morning. So it's very artistically prepared, delicate details in everything they do. Like I mentioned, multi-course and can accommodate some dietary restrictions. This is just one course as an example. It's some tofu with a piece of steamed shrimp, an edible garnish, and a little shishito pepper in a sauce. So this is another example of kaiseki. And you can see the line here is this is my side and this is, let's say, someone else's side. So you have a variety of little dishes here. They would bring you more after this. But this is just to give you a feel for the types of things that you might see. And this is an autumn meal. You could tell because of the yellow ginkgo leaf. So it's going to be autumn specialty foods like mushrooms and chestnuts and things like that. All right, so another example. It's just really beautiful and such little details like let's cut this out and make it into the shape of a leaf because why not? All right. Traditional breakfast is another feature that I mentioned before. Traditional breakfast is usually going to include miso soup, tsukemono, which are pickles of a variety of different vegetables, rice, and a protein. Some of the common proteins are natto, which is a fermented soybean, kind of fermented soybeans, salted fish, tofu, eggs. They can also include local specialties. Sometimes that's going to be maybe they specialize in itty bitty shrimp, or they specialize in a different kind of seaweed, or there were little clams in my miso soup in a place I was at in Shimane. So let's see here. This is a perfect example of what you're going to be looking at a traditional breakfast. And this one comes with spinach and sesame as a little bonus. And they'll give you however much rice you want. At the end of your evening meal, rice comes out, and the rice is there pretty much at every meal. So if you ever feel like you're still hungry, ask for more rice and you shall receive more rice. All right, so what are you going to do when you get to a ryokan? So activities are going to vary, obviously, based on where you are. Most of our travelers are going to stay for 1 to 2 nights at a ryokan, so the options are going to differ. This is Hakone. This is me walking down the old Tokaido Trail in Hakone. It's about an hour and a half little walk hike, and it leads to a cute little tea house. So that's an option there. There's sightseeing, hiking, onsen, geothermal activity, museums. An option like Kinosaki or Kurakawa Onsen Town. Those are both really focused on onsen, so night strolls or onsen hopping is the norm. You'll see people doing a rally, so they get stamps at all the different onsen that they've gone to, and it's just a super cute thing to watch everybody do or to take part in yourself. Leisurely meals, enjoying time with your loved ones and friends is the main goal of any ryokan stay. So anything else is kind of seen as a bonus. But places like Kaga Onsen, which is not too far out of Kanazawa, is a great place if you want a ryokan stay, but you want to do sightseeing in a city. So that's just another example. You can also get spa treatments. Some places are near ski resorts, so you can go skiing or snowboarding, local festivals, general sightseeing, day trips, all these things are possible. A couple examples. This is Furano. So these are the beautiful fields in Furano that you can see in Hokkaido. If you stay at a nearby onsen, you can go here as a day trip. This is, I don't remember which skijo this is. This might be up in Niseko in Hokkaido as well, or possibly in Nagano. Both areas have ryokan available. This is just a lovely hike. You have whitewater rafting in Gunma and Gifu, which is kind of in central Honshu, not too far away from Tokyo, maybe within 3-4 hours. This is hiking, or I'm sorry, this is not hiking at all. This is biking. This is bicycling outside of Takayama. So beautiful area in the Northern Alps, and snowshoeing again in Gunma. So depending on the season, you could do a lot of things, or you could just rest up. Ryokans are a beautiful place to have a little bit of a honeymoon stay as well. I often include them in my honeymoon itineraries because it's just a one-of-a-kind romantic experience with a private onsen on your balcony. Yes. Monkeys. If you stay at Yudanaka Onsen, you can go and visit the snow monkeys there. You do not bathe with the monkeys. They have their own baths, but they are not too far away, maybe about a 1 to 2 kilometer walk away from the town. You could go leaf peeping, which is called koyo in Japan. You can go and look at the beautiful autumn leaves. Usually from throughout November, toward the end of November is the best time of year in most areas. You can go and see the sakura, the hanami, the cherry blossoms, if I can get the English out, in springtime. This is Kinosaki again. And this is one last little onsen town, Ginzan Onsen in Obanazawa, Yamagata. So just another onsen town, very old-fashioned, super cool, really cute, with these little bridges going across the river and the traditional style of architecture on the streets as well. So that covers what I wanted to chat with you all about today. I would love to get any questions. Looks like we have one here from Meg. Understanding that natural scenery and relaxing surrounds is ideal for a ryokan stay, are there other reasons I wouldn't want to stay in a ryokan in Kyoto or a city? Yes. So if you are trying to stay at a ryokan, if you have a short trip and you want a ryokan stay and you're really only in the cities, that would be the only time I would recommend staying in a city ryokan. The reason for that is the atmosphere is such a component of the ryokan stay that I think is really helping the atmosphere. If you have a little garden that you're looking at that's within the middle of the city, it doesn't have the same feel as if you walk outside of your onsen or your ryokan and you have a forest around you and beautiful mountain views. And also the sounds of the city can kind of take away a little bit from a city ryokan stay. So that's why I tend to recommend them in the countryside more often. So if you have to, you can stay in Kyoto. Has a lot of ryokan, but a lot of the better ones are on the outskirts. So those few I mentioned in Kyoto earlier are kind of in the Arashiyama area, which is outside of the city limits a bit. So you wouldn't want a ryokan stay in the cities because you don't have as many options and you don't have the traditional atmosphere. When's the best time to go for cherry blossoms from Tracy? Cherry blossoms do kind of vary a little bit from year to year, so I cannot give you the exact timing because I am definitely not a weather girl. But I would say your best bet is the last week of March into the last week of April. That is traditionally when you see them. The past 2 years, they have started around March 21st in the central regions around Kyoto and Tokyo. So how hot is the water in the onsens from Valentina? The water varies. So usually a lot of onsen will actually list or have a little thermometer that shows how hot they are. And it is going to be in Celsius. So those of you in the US, wrap your head around the sea because it's a coming. I would say they're going to be anywhere from, you know what? I don't know it in Fahrenheit. I have to think about this. They're not going to burn you. I would say 35, 40. I need to check, honestly. I do not recall off the top of my head. It's been a little while. You can test it as well. A lot of the places will have one that's the hottest, and then they'll have a couple of others, and you can either work your way up to them, or you can just pop into whatever one feels comfortable for you. Dip your toe in, see how you feel, and sink into it slowly. If you ever remember that old Warner Brothers cartoon where Bugs Bunny was getting into the really hot bath and he kind of like inched his way in going, it's like that. So hit up the ones that are a little bit cooler first and then try your hand at the hotter ones. Most of the ryokan are going to have them at a good heat level, nothing that's going to scald you by any means. There's no danger of that. So typical price ranges for ryokan based on 4 to 5 star, including food. So That is a tough one because they vary so massively. If you are staying at, I would say a 4.5 to 5 star ryokan can vary anywhere from or 4 to 5 star, 450 per person per night to upwards of 1,000 per person per night. That is heavily dependent on season, on the specific room type, if you have a private onsen in your room, and in nearly all ryokan stays are inclusive of the breakfast and the dinner that I mentioned. There is really no way for us to book most of them without it. There are a couple of special cases in some areas, but if someone came to me and said, hey, I really want this ryokan stay, but I don't want the meal, I can't do that. Like, you would basically have to go to dinner and not eat, which is just sad because you paid for it and it's amazing. So how long is a typical trip? So a typical trip is typical. That's a tough one. We usually recommend people stay for at least a week. If you're going all the way to Japan, you're going to want to at least have a week. I would recommend as long as you can. 2 weeks is a great amount of time to cover the basics, to cover the most must-sees in the country, and also go to a couple of other places and really just delve in. If you only have a week, then the Golden Triangle route, which is one of the sample itineraries on our website, which is Tokyo, Kyoto, Hakone, is a good just first time trip, and you can see a lot. But if you have more time, take it. I lived there for 5 years and I still go back and see new things all the time, so you're not going to get bored. How many rooms does a ryokan typically have? Is it difficult to book 2 or 3 rooms at a ryokan if you're traveling with a group? As long as you're booking in advance, it's not problematic. If someone comes to me in February and says, hi, we want to travel at the end of March for cherry blossom season, and there are 10 of us, that's not likely going to happen. What we would look at is a ryokan meeting all of your other criteria. So if anyone in your group, let's say, has a very restrictive dietary need, that would make things hard. But what I would do is find a ryokan that meets all the criteria and has multiple rooms. So a smaller ryokan may only have 5 rooms, whereas a ryokan like the Kawaki and Tenyu in Hakone, I want to say, it's more modern, so it maybe has 30 rooms. I'm not 100% sure, but they do have larger sized ryokan, and a place like Hakone has a lot of ryokan. If you were staying in a smaller area like Takayama, they only have maybe 3 or 4 ryokan to choose from, so they do fill up faster. So that's when we play fast and loose and get creative with your routing if a ryokan is really key for you. So there are a lot of things we can do to help. Someone else asked about cost range. I mentioned that already, about 450 to 1,000 per person per night for a 4 to 5 star. 3 star you could do for less. And they are usually per person, not per room. So even if you're traveling with 4 people, you're not going to get a discounted rate for a room. It's going to be per person because of the meal and all other factors. So how difficult is it to travel in Japan without any Japanese language abilities? Any way to learn the most important phrases you can recommend? I'm glad you asked, Cindy. So I went to Japan knowing literally 1 word in Japanese, and that word was cat, neko. And it didn't help me at all until I saw a cat and went, neko, and the cat didn't care. So you do not have to have Japanese language ability to travel in Japan. What we do is we provide a really thorough info packet. We give you tons of information in advance of your trip. We make things as easy as possible for you. And the Japanese learn English as a mandatory subject. I actually taught English over there when I lived there for 5 years. So younger people will have had English class since they were in kindergarten. Older folks and middle-aged folks will have had it since they were in high school. So you're going to have everyone you run into will have had some exposure to English, whether or not they like the language or whether or not they have comfort in speaking English is another thing. But if you look confused for more than 30 seconds in a street in Tokyo, you will have people come up to you and ask you if you need help. I tested this when I was there last February, and I was just looking at a map, and 2 people came up to me in perfect English and asked me if I needed help. And I was like, no, thank you, in Japanese. So you don't really need English to travel in Japan. It's a fun country to explore without it. The subway and train station signage is also in English and Japanese. So if you are in Tokyo and you have a little free time and you want to go to a museum, you can easily figure out how to get there and take the trains following the signage and looking online, and you're going to likely have a Wi-Fi device, which will get you there with Google Maps as well. So it's super easy. I feel like it's on easy mode now than when I lived there because there's so much English signage nowadays. Phrases we can recommend, that information is also in your info packet. I usually recommend things that I would recommend for any country you're going to, learning how to say, please excuse me, yes, no. I'm I'm sorry, it's always good. It's a big one in Japan. And numbers, and if you have any kind of allergies, that kind of thing, but we do provide a card that'll state that allergy in Japanese on it for you. So if you have any specific questions, let me know, but I can also give you a quick list of phrases if you would like to know anything specific in an email, because I speak Japanese. So where should you stay to have the best chance of seeing the snow monkeys? So the snow monkeys really only reside in one location. They are just a troop of the macaques that live in the Northern Alps area around Yudanaka Onsen. So you would have to go to Yudanaka, which is about 3.5 hours outside of Tokyo by train. You would stay in Yudanaka, usually for just a night because there's not much there aside from the monkeys. And it takes about an hour, not quite, to walk from your accommodation out to where the monkeys are. If you're going at a quicker pace, you can get there faster. But the monkeys, if you're going in spring, summer, or autumn, you're likely not going to see monkeys because they might be around, but they're not going to be bathing because they really only do that in the winter when it's something they need for survival and comfort. So if you want to see monkeys, I have got you. I know where monkeys are all over the place, but if you want to see monkeys bathing, that's a different scenario, and that's in Yudanaka. So does anyone have any other questions? There was a lot there. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Oh, thank you all so much for joining us today. And if you do have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or our travel specialist to discuss any kind of trips to Japan or anything else you have questions about. Oh, one other one. Oh, thank you. We traveled with your team in May of 2018 and thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. I love sending people to Japan. It is an absolute passion of mine. It is my second home, like I said. And if you have any questions about Japan, the culture, travel, language, etc., please let me know. And I would love to send you to Japan.
Hey, Laura, if you just want to pop on to the next slide too, your email's up there, just in case anybody wants to write it down.
Sure.
And,
okay. And I got 2 more quick questions in.
Oh, neat.
Okay. So, Ryokan do you recommend in Takayama? It's going to depend on your star level. So if you're staying at the 4-star level, I love the Tanabe. It's family run. It's super cute. It's right in the middle of town, so you can pop out and do your sightseeing and have no problem whatsoever, just kind of seeing anything that you want to see. If you are looking for something that is a little on the fancier side, I'm getting a couple different names for you. There's the, hang on just a second, the Hanagi. I just want to remember the full name of it because it's a little bit of a mouthful. The Hanaogi Bete Yama is one we use. We use the Honjin Hiranoya Bekan, the Wanasato Ryokan. There are a handful of them that we use. It's really going to be dependent on availability though, because we talked about size before. And because some of these Ryokan are really small and only have 5, 8 rooms, if you're going during the spring or the autumn festival in Takayama per se, you are likely going to need to book 6 months or more in advance. If you're going at another time of year when there is more wide availability, then it's not so much a problem. So Michael, going now with Corona. So I'm assuming you're asking what's happening with the coronavirus in Japan right now. Excuse me if I misunderstood that. So right now, travel to Japan is still not happening, as it's not happening with a lot of different places in the world. I personally have a trip booked for October to take my family, including my not quite a year old little one, to Japan. So we're really just kind of following everything carefully and seeing how things progress. We're seeing new countries open up kind of day by day and in the coming weeks. So we're trying to stay as on top of it as we can, but we want to make sure travel is safe for everybody before we really start having people head back to Japan. So Cindy, you are quite welcome. Oh, yay. I'm glad you're considering Japan now. So anybody else, if you have questions, please feel free to ask here, or you're welcome to reach out to me at my email that's on the screen now. I would love to show you all what a ryokan stay is like, and it's not intimidating. I think a lot of people fear that it's kind of an intimidating experience and it's too fancy, but I can guarantee I'm not a fancy lady. And I have stayed at some really top-notch ryokan and itty-bitty mom and pop ryokan, and I've had an amazing experience at every single one of them.